Okay, ladies and gents, so as promised today we're going to be looking at some of the basic functions of logic. 10 steps. We're going to be looking at piano roll, quantize with humanize and EQ, VST instruments, effects, tools, logic loops, busing, mixer and score. So they're the different sections that we're going to be looking at today, and you can obviously take screenshots from what we've done in this session. Okay, let's make a start. So the first thing you're going to want to do is open up Logic Pro, and if you have it, obviously you can do it along with me. If not, no worries. We'll go for a new document. Okay, we'll start with 5 software instruments, and then we'll add another 5 audio instruments. Okay, obviously this is for the purposes of just explaining what's happening today. We're going with a basic understanding that you know how to use Logic, sort of 101. So we're building on from that. So the first thing we need to discuss is the piano roll. Well, in order to get the piano roll up, one of the things we need to do is create some sort of sequence, MIDI sequence section. So you can do that by clicking on from the pointer tool to the pencil tool and then creating one, and then you saw me extend that section. And then you can double click on here, which will then bring up the piano roll. Okay. Now there's 2 basic ways in which you can get information onto the piano roll. One is by putting it in, and now that we're in a different window, we've gone from having the pencil tool to the pointer tool again. So let's change this back to the pointer tool and then change this window to the pencil tool. They're 2 separate spaces, and then we can add a section in. Okay. We can change the velocity of that section to make it louder, and we can add different sections. And we can hear that. And that's a pretty simple way to do it. The other way to do it is by pressing record. So I'm pressing R on the keyboard now, and then you've got your keyboard to go with you. Whoop. And at the moment the keyboard doesn't seem to be connected, so let's try that again. Oh, okay, so the keyboard is connected, but I forgot to place any of the the recording on here. So I'm going to add that section there. I'm going to make sure that the recording is off of these sections as well, because we don't need that right now because we're not recording any audio. We'll try that again. Press record. Okay. Take the recording off that one as well. Okay. So we've now got this section here, and hopefully we can get some recording done. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, and as you can see, the difference between this first part that I put in and the second part that I put in is the first part is nice and neatly snapped to the grid, whereas the second part is less nice and neatly snapped to the grid. This is because this is being computerized and quantized, and this section has yet to be. Okay, so we'll talk about quantize in a minute. But the piano roll is a place where you can lengthen notes, shorten notes, put notes in, and if you've made a mistake at any point, you can change the mistake that you've made. Okay, so let's hear what that sounds like when we play it. Okay, so we made a mistake there. Put it back there. Okay, now I'm not happy with how out of time they are. If you listen to the click, it's kind of not great. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this again, pointer tool, I'm going to highlight the whole section of what I want to quantize, and I'm going to look at the different quantized values. Okay, so the different values are pretty interesting because 1 to 1 will snap to the larger of the sections, so here and here. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, that's weird. We don't want that because now we've lost loads of the data. It's still there, but it's behind those sections. So if I press Command Z to bring us back to where we were, and I'll quantize to 1/2 note. So now it's gone to halfway between those 2 as well. I still don't want that. Quantize to 1/4 note. That's kind of getting there, but we've got this issue right there. Quantize, oh sorry, undo that. Quantize to 1/8 note. Cool, but we don't have that rhythm. Ba, 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 ba. Not quite what we were looking for really, was it? So let's try it to 1/16 note. And this should be more like it. Yay, there we go. Okay, the other thing that it doesn't do is quantize the latter half of the note. And that becomes pretty useful when we are dealing with score at the end. So we'll just bring some of those to those notes, which can be done manually. As long as it's less than a note. Okay, so you can see I've left this one here on purpose. We'll do it as a slightly longer piece. So that's basically how you can put input two different areas. Quantize we've looked at as well, so you can quantize to sit different notes. You can also change the strength of the quantize to make it a little bit less quantized and very quantized, okay? And what that'll do is it'll give you a humanized feel to the function, okay? The other thing that you can do is change the velocity, so the volume of the notes, or the way that they've been hit, the attack of the notes. Okay, and that's the different sections. So we've looked at quantize, we've looked at a way to humanize using the strength section here. The next thing that I want to look at today is EQ. So we have to get to the channel strip settings. So you click on your channel that you want to look at, and it's down here on this section is the channel strip. There's another way to get the channel strip settings up as well though, which is to click on the mixer, and then all of your, in this case 10 channels will show on there. Okay, we still want to look at this first channel, but to save any confusion, let's just turn that one off for a minute and we'll work here. So we'll go through this channel strip setting step by step. Okay, first of all, you've got a solo here, so you can just hear this channel and no others. A mute button, so you can hear every other channel, but not that one. A volume fader. You've got your pan right, pan left, going to each of the two speakers. Excuse me, each of the two speakers. You've got where you want the sound to come out from. In this case, the stereo output, which is what we want. You've got some buses here as well. They're already preset, so we'll turn that off for a minute. You've got your audio effects section here, which we'll go into shortly, and your MIDI effects section. Then you've got your EQ and then your actual setting for this channel, which at the moment is on classic electric piano. So the different VST instruments that we can look at, each one of these can now be set to a different area. Okay. Before we look at that though, we'll go into some EQing. So let's hear this for now. Cool, sounds all right. Let's add in the some EQ. So let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, and that's essentially what you're doing there. What we can do is we can actually go down to here to keyboards, and it's a sort of weird vintage key, so we see how that works. Cool, so that's given us a channel strip setting. What we're actually doing here in EQ is we are changing and enhancing or decreasing the frequency response of the instrument by looking at the frequency range from 20 to 20,000 hertz and expanding on certain areas by bringing the amount that we hear of that frequency up or down, and that's really what the process is, to sort of pick out different areas. So if we take this area, for example, make it massive, we can make it tiny, and so that gives us an idea of what the frequency response can do. The interesting thing starts to happen when you've got two instruments together. So let's try to add another instrument in. Let's add a drum kit, shall we? Retro rock drum kit. And I'm going to play this one in. It might be a bit easier for me to do that. I'm just going to find myself. So I'm using the keys on the keyboard to create a rhythm. Let's try and find a better, there we go, a better rhythm. Here we go. So you've got kick. You've got kick. Okay, maybe we don't have kick. It was there a moment ago. Okay, it doesn't want to do kick for me at the moment for some reason. But it's got everything. Okay, the kick's a bit lower. Okay, let's try and do this together. We've got kick, snare, hi-hat, and then we're going to try and create a rhythm. 2, 3, 4. Okay, and there's the rhythm that's been created. We can then double click on that one, and we can highlight it all and quantize. Go 1/16 note again. Okay, so now we've got something pretty cool. You can make it smaller, and then you can loop by pressing on the top end. Okay, so size at the bottom. Go to the top and loop. We'll do the same with that one as well. And now we've got a looped rhythm. Okay, so now we've got a pretty good rhythm there. We want to be looking at the relationship between these two in terms of their frequency response. So on this particular one, we can see that there is a boost around the 100 part. So if we come to the retro rock and look at the EQ of that, we don't want to use up the same space as a boost around the 100. Okay, now actually 100 is a really good boost area for a kick drum, so let's move that one out of the way a little bit, and then we can now give that frequency response to this drum kit instead. And we also want to give it a bit of a frequency response here for the snare. And we can find where the snare sounds. There it is. And we haven't taken it from the 1K here, so that's absolutely fine. And we could probably afford some space in the two, but for now that's good enough, and we'll take off the top roll as well. So we've got a high pass filter there and a low pass filter here. So we're taking out we're filtering all of the low frequencies below 50 vibrations per second here, and we're filtering out all of the high frequencies above sort of 15,000, say 10,000 vibrations per second there. It just takes all the muddiness out if there was any. So now we've got the relationship between those two dealt with in terms of EQ, the next thing we want to be thinking about is the effects that we can add to those. So let's go onto the piano and we'll go to the channel strip setting where it says effects. There's obviously already a channel EQ on there, but we can now add another effect. So let's add in delay. We'll do a stereo delay. And we can hear to what that sounds like. We'll solo the track by pressing S on the keyboard. Okay, quite mental. Let's bring the amount of the mix down in the right hand speaker to 10 and the amount of the mix in the left hand speaker to 13. Not too bad, could probably even come down even more. Okay, good. And we'll do a different effect on the retro rock. Let's have a look at a compressor. There's already one preset. So one of the things that we can do is go up to the presets up here, go to drums, and then we can do FET live drums, and it gives us a preset. Whoops. So we didn't solo that section, so let's solo that and unsolo that one. Now we can see here that we're not getting any frequency change. So we now need to increase the amount of input. Take the threshold down. And I've just realised that the compressor's off, so make sure you turn the compressor on, and now we can hear the difference between there. Okay, so let's bring that input gain back a wee bit. That's with a compressor, that's without a compressor. It doesn't just make it louder, because we can turn the volume down, it gives it more presence in the mix. Let's add another piece of dynamics to it. We could add in fact, we could add some more delay to this one as well. Do a stereo delay, bring the amount right down, and we'll bring it to a semi-quaver and a quaver. Cool. Let's hear those two together. Okay, so it's starting to sound a bit better with effects. Let's add a bass guitar in there as well. So we go to bass, and we'll go to a subby bass, and then we're here. And let's record that. 2, 3, 4. Okay, I wasn't really happy with that last note. Move it there. There we go. And I'm going to quantize those by pressing Q on the keyboard, or you can press Q here as well. I also don't like the fact that the notes overlap, so I'm going to bring them all back ever so slightly. There we go, and I'm going to shorten and loop. And now we've got a full section of 3 different tracks. I'm going to add some EQ. Just cheat, it's easier. Guitar. Where have we got? Bass boost EQ. E-bass EQ. And there we go. There we go, and we've got those 3 sections. So we've looked at VST instruments, we've looked at effects. The next section is tools. Now I've got mine set to the right click, so I'll just go through each of those sections. You've got your pointer tool, which can select, deselect, and do some of those things that we discussed here. You've then got your pencil tool, which will allow you to put different sections in. Eraser tool, which gets rid of sections. You've got your text tool, which can change the text in a text box to Tune. You've got your scissors tool, which cuts the box if you need it to. We're going to do that. Keep. And then we're going to undo that by pressing Command Z. And you've got your glue tool. So if you had two sections together, you could glue them. Pressing Alt to create a ghost of it and adding it. And now I want to glue those two sections together. So highlight them and press glue. And now they're glued together. I'm going to undo that as well. They're the main ones. You've got zoom, mute, and solo. So a lot of the time you'll find that you can do functions in a multitude of different ways. So yeah, that's one thing to consider. Another thing that we do need to look at as well is automation. So if I click onto this button here at the top, it brings up automation. The other way to do it is by pressing A on the keyboard, and that brings up automation. At the moment, the automation parameter that I'm changing is volume, but you can change that to anything. So you could change it to pan, for example. Let's try with that. So we're going to start in the right hand, and then we're going to change very slowly, or quite quickly actually, over to the start in the left pan, go over to the right. If we solo that, we'll be able to hear the difference. I'll show you the difference. You might not be able to hear it, but so it's that side, middle, and it's moved over to that side now. You can also do volume, which you'll be able to hear a lot easier in this medium. But that's not the only parameters that you can change. We added earlier on a delay, so we could change the amount of delay, input left and input right. Do input left. We could choose the amount of, we can have it off or we can have it on. No delay, no delay, no delay, and delay. Okay, so there's the parameters that you can change about automation, and you can get really, really specific with it as well. So you could be, in the middle of your track, really, really deep into it, and doing some amazingly specific work. So let's click on that. We could do 6 or 7 different things here and bring it down. Okay. You could also do an automation curve tool, which is quite cool. Okay, let's try that. It's not working for some reason for now, which is a bit frustrating, but there we go. Okay. We'll move on from that in which case, but you can be very specific about the automation that you add. Okay, let's move on. Logic loops is an interesting one. So we've got these 5 different sections down here. Let's add some logic loops to that. We'll expand on this section there, and we'll go out of automation, and we can add some loops here. Let's go over to loops, and we will look for a acoustic strum, and we'll drag and drop an acoustic strum in there, and we'll solo that one and hear what it sounds like. Whoops. Get rid of that one. So we now have an acoustic drum. And you could put bass to that. I'm not sure what key that's in. It's in C. There we go, let's put the bass to it. 2, 3, 4. And now we've created some nice loops. We'll quantize that by pressing Q on the keyboard. We can add some drums to that as well. We'll get rid of the drums that we had in the first instance. We'll solo those. Okay, let's try that too. Okay, and we've quantized to that one as well. Okay, interesting that we found there is that the quantized value isn't the same. So now if we quantize, we have to make sure that we've got the right pace for this piece of music. So let's do that quickly now. Okay, it's not too bad, so that's all good. We'll add that bass in and do the retro rock one more time. Solo the track. There we go. Okay, and there we have our full track. Yay, we can sing over the top of that. So in terms of logic loops, you can just drag and drop them from here all the way across. We might be able to put 2 together if we are very, very lucky. but you can drag in your loops and work from those there. Okay. Now busing is a really interesting one. Let's say, for example, we've got a drum kit and we want to make sure that all of the drum kit sounds like it's in the same space. We might want to individually add effects to the different parts of the drum kit. We might want to add bit crusher to the snare. Maybe the hi-hat will have a particular EQ on it, but overall, we'd like it to sound like it's in the same space. The way that we're going to go about doing that is by attributing all of the channel strip settings for that instrument to a particular effect channel. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a drum kit that does exactly that. So I'm just going to copy those two sections there, and this drum kit has got 3 areas. So if I just Alt and drag that down, Alt and drag that down, and in the top one we're going to make this the kick. The next one we're going to make the snare. And the next one we're going to make the hi-hat. But obviously they've all got all of those instruments in already, so you need to click on those, you need to isolate, that's the kick, get rid of everything else in the top one. So there's your kick, and the second one I want to get rid of the kick, and I want to get rid of all of the hi-hats, and in the third one I want to get rid of all of the kick and snare. Okay, so now we've got the 3 sections. Let's have a little listen to them individually. Snare, hi-hat. Okay, so on the hi-hat I want to have EQ, which makes the most of that particular setting. And it's a high setting, so let's bring that up and we'll bring that to there. Okay, that's all right, it's not bad. Sounds a bit tinny. There we go. Okay, the snare wants to have its own setting. There we go. And the bass kick wants to have its own EQ setting. Okay, so we've got a setting which is pretty extreme. Let's bring that down a bit there. I'm aware that that's not particularly good, by the way. I'm just doing it for speed. So we've now got those 3 sections which we can hear together. Okay, but all together I want to add the same EQ setting, sorry, the same reverb setting to all 3 of them. So I now need to bring up the mixing desk. I need to highlight the 3 areas that I'm interested in using by pressing on the top one, holding down the shift button and pressing on the 3rd one, so you can highlight all 3. We're then going to go down to where it says bus here, and at the moment these are already set to bus 1, but for the purposes of what we're doing I'll change that. So change it now to a different bus setting. Let's change it to bus 24, and over here now we have an auxiliary. Oh, let's just change that 2 seconds. Let's change it to bus 4. There we go. We've got an auxiliary 5 over here, so we can call that now drums. So now those 3 are now attributed to this one channel strip setting. So if I now go on to here and I put something pretty extreme on, let's hear something that's really going to make a big difference to this. Delay is pretty easy to hear, so we'll do a stereo delay, but we'll do something pretty extreme. So now we can hear quite a lot of delay. Let's add a bit crusher to that. Okay, so one thing that we didn't do earlier on is we've got the bus here, but we've not turned it up. So let's turn the bus right up. Okay, starts to sound pretty nasty. Let's hear those without the soda one. Okay, didn't change that top one. So that's how you use buses. They are an umbrella. you collect the different channel strips together, and then you will add a effect to all of those, which will affect them all in the same way. And the good thing about that is if you add things that are a bit more normal, like for example reverb, you can add, it sounds like they're all in the same space, that they were recorded in the same environment. Space designer that we've got here. We can change it to a large space, bring reverb, hold down spiral. Interesting. Okay, so that's something that you can do using buses. It's pretty simple. You highlight them, you choose the bus channel, and then you turn up the bus, and then you've got a auxiliary out here which you can then change. Okay, and that's busing in a nutshell. It's an important thing to be able to do in order to make an instrument with many parts sound like it's been recorded in the same space. The mixer is this section here. This is the mixer itself, and it's all of the channel strip settings for each one of those sections. We've gone through what one of the channel strip settings does, and they all work in exactly the same way. So once you've learned one of them, you've learned every single one of them. It's really just a case of trying it. Stop and start this video, give it a go if you've got access to Logic or even GarageBand. Give it a go and see how it works. Okay. The score is an interesting one. It's a way to turn your MIDI project, your MIDI arrangements, into a standard Western notation score. So what you can do is you highlight the MIDI project, which brings up your piano roll, which we're all used to, but then you can click on score, which now turns it into a score. So you can then print that off and give it to a a choir, or you could pass it to a string group or whatever, and then they can use that, and essentially it turns it into a score. The one thing that you've got to be a bit careful of, as we looked at this tune here, for example, if I just get rid of those a minute. Is a note that's a bit too long. You might have one that's a bit too long, like this one. Okay, so if I just highlight that one for a minute and go to the score, you'll see which one's highlighted, and it can sometimes make it a bit difficult, like that, for example. So you just got to be careful that the length of the end of the note is also correct using the score. We've gone through a lot there, a lot, but it's an important thing for you to look at. We've looked at piano roll, we've looked at quantize, humanize, VST instruments, effects, tools, logic loops, busing, mixer, and score. And obviously you can take screenshots from what I've got here. Ideally, you'll use your own screenshots for this project, the ones that you created before we left, okay? You're not just going to talk about those 10, you might talk about other things that you've personally used in that area, and make sure that you describe what the tool is, what the function is, explain how it's useful and what it does and how it affects the sound, and then go on to, if you can, to discuss, comment critically on it. So why would we humanize? What's the importance of busing and how does it work? Why would you decide not to use logic loops? What are the limitations of the piano roll and the score? So they're the things that you need to be thinking about in your write-up. Talk about all 10, describe them all for a pass, explain them all for a merit, and comment critically on all of them for a distinction, and use these screenshots or screenshots from this video in order to support you to do that. If you've got any problems or a lack of access for one reason or another, please do send me an email, but all going well, all of you should be able to use this video to create your write-up on this one. Obviously the only thing that we will be missing is your actual MIDI project, which we'll be creating next year now, or hopefully after half term if we're back in that time. Okay, thanks very much for listening, and look forward to seeing you guys soon. Cheers.